Sure.
And Ellen might be a participant.
Recording in progress.
Good evening. I would like to call the December 11th Addison Central School District Board meeting to order. The current time is 6:30. With that, the first thing we do is introductions. So what I'd like to do is start with Ellen.
Hi, Ellen Newland.
Brian.
Joanna Doria. Nicole Carter speaking for Jim Williams.
Barbara Wilson.
Lindsay Hescott.
Steve Warzak. Dave House.
Sophia Lawton.
Suzanne Buck.
Mary Heather Noble.
Chip Malcolm. Jim Callen.
Trisha Allen.
Jason Jones. Matt Christie. Finance operation.
And administration in the audience.
I'm the Director of Communications. Lucille High School Principal.
Jen Kravitz, Mary Hogan Principal. Courtney Cron, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Excellent, thank you so much. It's the time in our agenda where we open up the floor for public comments on agenda items specifically. And in this case, if you do want to speak, you'll have 3 minutes. And again, it has to be on an agenda item. Is there anyone in the room that would like to speak? Okay.
My name is Kaiser Arson, and I'm a 5th grader at Mary Hogan School. I'm here to support Elias's idea of having a Black Lives Matter flag at Mary Hogan. I support this idea because it would be good. It would be a good way to express that everyone is welcome here.
Okay.
Do you want to repeat your name?
Kaiser Arson.
Okay, the next one is say your name, please.
Mael. I'm a 4th grader at Mary Hogan. I'm also in student council. I'm here to support Elias's idea of getting a Black Lives Matter flag. I'm supporting this idea because I think all people should be treated equally. And it will make more people feel welcome. This is next one.
Okay. Any other folks that would like to make a public comment that are in the room? Seeing no hands, is there anyone? Oh, I'm so sorry.
Little nerves over here.
Okay.
Robin would love to hear from you.
It's okay. What's your name? It's okay. Okay.
Do you, by any chance, have notes? Do you want someone on the board to read a statement?
Okay. Is there anyone that's on Zoom? If so, raise your Zoom hand. Seeing none? Thank you so much. Moving forward, the next item on the agenda is the recommendation to approve the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes today, 10:23 and 11:27. So first, can I have a motion to approve the minutes for October 23rd? Who was that? Ellen, okay. And a second? Jason. Are there any comments or updates on the minutes? Okay. So all those in favor of approving the October 23rd minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed by saying no? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes pass. The next set of minutes is for November 27th. May I have a motion to approve the minutes? Okay, Jason, a second? Chip? Okay, so any comments on the minutes? Yes.
I have one comment only. It's a misspell under committee reports and finance in the last sentence. We're talking about ESSER money, but it says but will likely resume the need to burrow at certain times of the year. I know what we were thinking, but I thought I should correct it since it may have a different connotation.
Any other comments on the minutes? Okay, so all those in favor of approving the minutes as corrected, as edited, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes pass. Next on the agenda is our time to approve the ACSD bills, and I'll turn it over to Chip.
Bills were read today by Jason and myself. There's the general fund warrant, which is, again, for a lot of money, $1,317,609.35. Breaking out the big items in that is $143,000, because these are round numbers for transportation, and $490,000 for health and dental care, which seems to come up a lot, just so that we're aware of how it's made up. Second warrant is a payroll warrant for $1,743.51. Next is a payroll warrant for $902,701.15. And the fourth warrant is for McGilton Fund expense of $3,793.31. I make a motion that we approve the bills as read.
Second. Okay, Jamie, thank you. Any questions on the bills? Seeing none. And all those in favor of approving the ACSD bills, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The bills are approved. Moving on, we're doing good. Okay, Matt, if you could move Ellie over, that's awesome. Thank you. Next on the agenda is report of our student representatives, Abby Ellis and Sophia Lawton. I'll hand it over to you guys.
Okay, so, first thing that I have is, our student council has begun working with a group called Third After Vermont to create a voter registration drive at the high school. So all students who are eligible to sign up and get registered to vote will hopefully have an opportunity at some point in the coming months to do that through a little registration drive. So I'm really excited about that personally, but I think that's a really cool thing that's going on. There's people noticed a lack of student participation and attendance at a lot of events and things so far this year. So we're starting to get some efforts to try and increase that. I heard the school Spark group is working on a way of getting more students to come out to support events through like they're trying to come up with ways to incentivize students to come out like that. So there's some work on getting culture around extracurricular events built. Yeah, those are pretty good ones.
So the half-day programs at the Career Center are currently working on getting 10th grade visits to come up. NUHS will come up the 19th, and then Mount A will come up on this Wednesday.
Any questions for our student reps? Thank you so much. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the Mary Hogan Black Lives Matter flag. In your board pack materials, you'll see a request to fly the Black Lives Matter flag at the Mary Hogan made by Elias Urain. You'll also find a copy of policy F27, which was adopted by the board on in October 2021. For those who were not on the board at the time, this policy had come about as a result of students from the high school requesting to fly the Black Lives Matter flag And at the time, the board felt that it was critical to have a policy that would enable the board to handle different types of flag requests to ensure that any flag flown supported our educational values and mission. After the policy was adopted, the board then voted unanimously to allow the Black Lives Matter flag to fly at the high school for the remainder of that year. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Elias, and he wanted to address the board. If you want to just come up here. And right there is fine, huh?
My name is Elias Ryan. I'm a fourth grader at Mary Helen Elementary School. Thank you for letting me be here today. I'm here because I want your permission to hang a Black Lives Matter flag on the flag at Mary Helen. Last year, me and my mom were driving in the car and we were talking about belonging and how the school is trying to make students feel they belong by doing things like spirit days. This made me think about something that I hope that didn't represent belonging to Black students, a Black Lives Matter flag. Sometimes as a Black student at Mary Hogan, I feel upset because it's harder having more Black students and teachers in my school. This is one of the reasons I would like a Black Lives Matter flag at home. This is one of the reasons I would like my school to have a Black Lives Matter flag. For Black students, the flag would help us remember that we're not alone. When I see a Black Lives Matter flag, it makes me feel happy and supported. I want other Black students and teachers at my school to feel it too. Another reason I want a Black Lives Matter flag is because it would be a reminder to white teachers and students to wear their bias and to be sure they are treating everyone fairly. In many schools, Black students get punished more harshly than white students. Black students should not have to worry about that. School should be a place of fairness where all students know they will be treated with respect. School should be a safe place where everyone feels like they belong. School should also be a place where all students feel like they matter. These are the reasons why I think the school should get a Black Lives Matter flag. This idea is important to me. I hope you will say yes. Thank you for your time. I also have a petition, and yeah.
Do you want to give it to me? Do you know how many signatures there were? Over 100. Still very much. And these are students at the, at Mary Hogan, yes.
Fourth, fifth, and go first.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
So,
I know I'm not Elias, but I guess as the principal of Mary
Yes,
Hogan, I would love the opportunity to just address the board to say, like, I really appreciate that you heard Elias's really thoughtful reasoning behind why Mary Hogan should fly the Black Lives Matter flag on the government flagpole. And I really encourage you to support his proposal. He's been working on this proposal since he was in 3rd grade and worked with both Amanda Burnham and Jessica McCauley, his teachers, on this proposal. He's worked with me to understand the process for why he couldn't just like put it up the flagpole. And he's been super respectful of that process. He's also been really careful in teaching both. He talked with the faculty and staff at a meeting about why he feels it's important, as well as talked to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classes about why it's important. He's committed to not only explaining his perspective, but also working within the policy. His work is an example of the inquiry, reflection, and taking action that's inherent in what we do in the primary years program at Mary Hogan. Students are thoughtful, wise, and their leadership is essential to our school continuing to be an awesome place to learn and grow. Moreover, by raising the Black Lives Matter flag at Mary Hogan, it will allow our school to continue to live into our core beliefs of belonging, connection, and respect. The Black Lives Matter flag, as Elias says, will make him and others feel more welcome, more acknowledged, and more seen. It's essential that all of our students at Mary Hogan feel a sense of belonging and connection at school. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag is one more step toward doing this. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me and Elias, and I really hope you move forward on his proposal.
Well, at this point, there is a motion on it, so we would make the motion and then have discussion. I mean, I'm sorry, there's an action.
I'd like to make a motion to flag the black flag, counter flag.
Okay, now we can have discussion.
First thing is
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. The first thing I'd like to do is thank the students from Mary Hogan for coming. It's a tough situation to sit or to talk for a large group of adults that you don't know, and that takes some toughness. So I think you're doing well. Okay. Now I'm going to make a statement here that is more directed, I think, to the adults in the room. And hopefully it'll lead to further conversations. Our role as a school board is to promote respect. That's what I just heard, by the way. Respect for everyone. To focus on one group, to me, is divisive and contrary to our goals of equity and inclusion. So that's a thought. You may disagree with it, that's fine. But that's where we're at. We're trying to deal with inclusion, not the separation of people, not the grouping of people. So that's where I'm coming from. But once again, I'd like to thank the students for telling me what they have in mind also.
Jason?
I would like to commend your leadership. Thank you for coming. It's great. I just want to say that I think you should absolutely fly the flag, and it, yeah, 100%.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, Jamie and then Chip.
Thanks again, Elias, and thanks for supporting his proposal. I think it's great. I think we should do it. I think it is the kind of symbol that is actually indicative of broad inclusion, equity, not sort of how one group or this group, whatever. I think it's like, we've been doing this now for 10 years in America, since the BLM movement really got going. And I think that we've had so many, the national conversation has begun to shift to understand that symbol and that flag as one that is broadly representative of things like justice and equity and inclusion for all kinds of people. And so I support it for that reason. I'll also say, just as that we had someone come about 6 or 7 or 8 months ago and raised this issue from the high school. And our board, it was from the public comment, and our board didn't act in response to that. And I think, hindsight being what it is, that was probably a mistake, and I commend students for, and Jen for coming here and raising it again.
Chip.
This issue was 2-3 years ago was a very, very difficult issue because we didn't have a policy. And the Black Lives Matter flag was the stimulus to develop policy. Once we had the policy, all of us could come together and support that. It is I believe it's in this space for a limited time, and we can discuss that. But I think for everyone here, even though we can come around this and support it, it can work both ways. And hopefully we don't get to a point where we're arguing about something which is not in our values at some point, but that can also come up in front of our board. And that was what was so difficult in trying to come up with a situation where we could express what we felt was important, but without putting ourselves in a position that we were having to express something that was not in our value place. And honestly, just looking around the country right now with some of these huge issues, whether they're presidents of universities or anything else, this is a really, really hard issue. Not this issue, but this issue of everybody's opinion can be heard, and thus as a board, how do we express those opinions as best as we can without compromising the freedom to express your opinions.
So Also, Elias, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for all the work that you've already put into this request. I'm really impressed, and I thank you for taking action on this the way that you have. It's wonderful. Looking at the wording of our policy, it's, we have the option of voting to allow a flag to be flown that would support our educational values and mission. And I think that our guests here today have made very compelling arguments as to why flying the Black Lives Matter flag is something that supports our educational values and mission. So again, thank you for all the hard work and all the effort that all you guys, you students who are here tonight, have put into this ahead of this time. And I agree that we should move forward with voting yes.
I just want to add on to what Tricia just said. This year already, this board has heard a lot about issues in the schools involving Black staff and students. And you put a lot of time into this strategic plan for equity. I think it would go against a lot of decisions you already made this year not to support this idea. And I absolutely support the idea of raising the Black Lives Matter flag. And I think that it really speaks to what Jamie said about a broader idea of inclusion. And I think it also really would be a good way for the board to show that they're gonna walk the walk with all the stuff that you guys have been talking about so far this year. And I think that's kind of a thing that you should take into consideration. Like, this is your opportunity to show that you meant what you've been talking about. I would encourage you all to follow through with it.
Suzanne, as Chip alluded, when we were first approached several years ago about the high school and the request, another part of the conversation that had been so heated was having any other flags other than the federal flag and the Vermont flag on the official flagpole. We finally all were able to put aside, I guess, for the betterment of everyone, our desire not to have any flags other than the US flag and the Vermont flag on the main flagpole. But there were still members on the board that really felt that the government flagpole needed just those two flags, and we should have another flagpole for other flags that students may want to raise. But we do have this policy here. I'm very appreciative of every single person that spoke, even our friend over there that has her comments, but maybe you could email them to us. And that might not feel so threatening as to sitting in front of a group of people and going, oh my goodness. But I do appreciate all of your comments, and I would challenge you to think maybe one step further, Elias. I spoke with a parent who I worked with who wanted to, at our workplace, wanted to raise the Black Lives Matter flag. And I said, just out of curiosity, I said, I'm not saying no, I didn't say no to her. I said, but what does that flag say to other students that may not be of color? Does it include them as well? And she paused, and I paused, and my question was, I wanted to learn. I wasn't trying to be snarky or anything, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to know what that flag represents all students. And we never were able to answer our question. So Elias, that's my question to you. Can you help me answer that?
Well, it would kind of mean like if there's like a Black Lives Matter flag at the school, then maybe it can help them believe in maybe getting like a flag for like whatever their problem is, or like they could just I feel like it could help them believe that they can do it. So yeah.
That's such a great answer, off the cuff like that. I know. I'm off. Thank you.
then,
And
oh, and Ellen, I'm sorry, Lindsay and then Ellen.
I also want to say thank you, Elias. That took so much courage. And like, I feel emotional because I'm so proud of you. And knowing that you're part of our school community, I've seen you play soccer with my son. And I didn't know you were such a powerful leader too. I know you're dominant on the soccer field. I just feel really appreciative that you took the time to stand in front of people and say what you had to say. I really hope you encourage other people to do that. And when you have other things that you want to say in the future, say them. You know, I respect the way that you did this and you worked with your school and you brought people together and I'm really grateful. So thank you, Elias. Yeah, you're an amazing person.
I just want to, in response to Suzanne, to what you said, Black Lives Matter is just a true statement, right? It's the statement that we should all be working towards and asserting. I think it's very easy for white people to hear most at the end of that statement or more. I think, Brian, that's what I interpret in part of your concern.
Okay.
As a racist interpretation of a true statement that our country's history and our country's present have not always upheld. Black Lives Matter has to be said out loud because we have not culturally, politically, historically reinforced that. So I think I support flying this flag everywhere. I think it should be on government poles because our government has denied that reality many times. And I think for anyone who might hear at the end of that statement an exclusion of their own value, that's an opportunity to question why any of us hear that when we read or hear Black Lives Matter.
Interesting. And I think also just in response to Suzanne's question about how other students would feel, I think to some extent that question has already been answered by the fabulous Remsen ladies who came in support of Elias's request, as well as the 100+ signatures of 4th and 5th graders at the school. And knowing if only polling the 4th and 5th grade and getting 100+ signatures, that's pretty much all of the 4th and 5th grade at Mary Hogan. You know, knowing what the population of the school is, it seems as though, students across the board are at the very least supportive and would like to see this go forward.
Any other comments? Okay, Steve.
As Ellen said, it's a true statement. We should do it. Thank you, Elias, for organizing around this. You absolutely should fly that flag. Black Lives Matter.
Heather.
Thanks, I wanted to go last, but I didn't have to.
Yeah, if you remember what you said.
I too want to thank you, Elias, for your statement and for your courage to get up in front of a bunch of adults and say something very true and powerful. I think a lot of us are in the same headspace as you and feeling very much in agreement. And I just want to underscore Ellen's point. It is a true statement. I found it kind of challenging last time around when we had this before the board. And I feel like at that time it was also a student who really taught the adults in the room what was important.
Okay. So one thing, the request asked that the flag be flown through the end of the school year, right? I'm not sure if we need to amend the motion that was made, because we didn't put the time limit on it, correct? Heather?
We did not. What I heard was just to fly the flag at Mary Hogan, and I was just gonna tag on as requested. But
Yeah.
It's based on policy, right, unless we change.
Okay, Is everyone okay with that, or you could do a
Follow,
little?
their request follows the policy.
I move that we modify to say that the Black Lives Matter will fly until the end of the school year.
Okay, can I have a second? Okay, any discussion on that? So let's go ahead and vote on that, then we can go back to the main motion. All those in favor of amending the current motion to include through the end of the year, so indicate by saying school year, so indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yay.
Any abstentions? Okay, so I don't see her anymore.
Hand is up, fabulous.
You need to move her over.
She signed off.
She's there.
She's back.
Thank you, I got booted off and I couldn't, and wasn't able to vote, but I voted
Okay, and so
for
now,
the amendment.
thank you. So now, the main motion basically reads to approve flying the Black Lives Matter flag at Mary Hogan through the end of the school year. And that's the motion that is currently on the table right now. So we'll go ahead and do the vote. So all those in favor of flying the Black Lives Matter flag at Mary Hogan through the end of the school year, so indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yay.
One, okay. Any abstentions? This requires a supermajority vote, which would be 10. So the motion passes. Congratulations. And thank you so much, Elias, for coming before the board. That was very brave. I really appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Next, we have the report of the superintendent. Dr. Carter is here in Dr. Williams' place, so I'm going to turn it over to her at this time.
Before I talk about staffing, I think Elias, you're here with your mom. And I just want to name that your mom brought your child here to advocate for himself. And as a fellow parent,
Both moms, yes.
even better. So I see you both and I commend the bravery and that it takes. And
Proud of
thank you
you.
for setting the example.
Thank you for listening, appreciate it. For all his support.
Staffing. So we have two appointments. One is for Maurice Bissonette, he's known as Mo Bissonette, as a behavior interventionist 1.0. And Sherry Lackard, paraeducator 1.0.
I have additional staffing, but I don't hear if you wanna.
Yeah, let's do these two first.
I'll make a movement to
Yeah.
make a motion to appoint Maurice Bissonette and Sherry Lackard.
Okay. Any discussion on the appointments?
Mo Bissonette is the 1.0. Is he going to be primarily starting at one school? Is that 1.0 split between schools?
That's a good question. He's actually 1.0 at Addison Consortium program, the middle school
okay.
program.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. So all those in favor of approving the appointments of Maurice and Sherry, so indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And I can't see Ellie. Did we lose Ellie?
Dropped off again. Lost her.
We lost her again? Okay, well, the motion passes. So,
With or without her.
yeah. Next.
Additional staffing information for you all. Posted today / tomorrow is a payroll coordinator. You'll see it posted, and a special educator. And then in addition to those postings I thought it might be nice to name the things we have open in case anyone's listening or knows someone. we're looking for assistant track and field coach, 2 at the high school, 5 paraprofessionals, another 2 paraprofessionals for a total of 7. 1 BIPOC facilitator at MOMS. We recently secured someone for the high school, and those are the open positions.
Any questions?
Nicole, what is a BIPOC facilitator? Can you say more about that position?
Yeah, there is a hope with all fingers and toes crossed that there'll be a BIPOC affinity space at MOMS the way there is at the high school. And so we're looking for a facilitator.
Is that a part-time position or full-time position?
And Suzanne, special educator, is that a new position or someone?
Yeah, it's a new position.
Okay. So, moving on. Yeah, I'm sorry, Steve, I didn't see.
This is the personnel section. Is there gonna be any further discussion about the administrative changes, or is that gonna be discussed at all in this meeting?
I did not have it on my list, but I'm more than happy to.
Okay.
Would you like me to say it?
I mean, I don't wanna.
Really? I mean, go.
Yeah.
It's been mentioned.
Hang on, I'm sorry, just point of order. We haven't voted. Oh, I'm sorry, we did vote. I just want to make sure I'm keeping my notes correctly.
Yeah.
I just had the first position. Was that motion for both positions?
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, that's why I was caught.
Sorry.
No problem.
So we currently have, I believe this is what you're speaking of, we currently have 2 administrators on leave, and we
Yes.
have Bjarke Sears, who's the principal of Salisbury, also as the principal of Cornwall temporarily for about 6 weeks. And then Mike Dudek is supporting him as an assistant principal, and they have a schedule so that when one person's at Salisbury, the other is at Cornwall and vice versa. And then they've split some other duties. And then we also have Matthew Brinkman on leave, and we're gonna have Suzanne English come in.
Susan English.
Susan English, thank you.
Yes.
But Tracy Harrington was having such a good time that she decided to stay, so she will be there through the end of, until we go on break.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions before we move on to the next item that's on the, under the report of the superintendent? Okay.
Okay, I believe next is Matt Corrente.
Yeah, it's Matt for the.
It's actually Bruce. I'm gonna bring Bruce up on the screen here.
Passing it around.
He's just outside.
Picture from out front, but it was light out then.
Yep.
We can
See your arm.
There's an arm that's talking to us.
We can't see you, Bruce.
You can't see me.
Can
We
you
can
step,
see the.
move closer to your
gotta get
camera?
close.
In a parallel universe.
My camera's doing funky things, sorry.
Sure.
Oh, I think, do you have your laptop in front of you?
I think your
That
green
is-
screen isn't
Yeah,
quite as
that's
good.
blocking your face.
It's okay. You can.
That's so weird, okay. Let's see.
It's even weirder.
Here, let's see, that might be better.
Oh, you're really moving.
Okay,
Hi, Bruce.
there we go. Magically appeared under the tree.
All right.
Okay, yes, so what you have before you is in your board pack is an explanation of what we did last time, where you approved the requirements for specific contractors to bid on the Mary Hogan HVAC project. We sent that out to 13 different firms. We also advertised it as well. We had 2 companies respond, and so the 2 were Red Loaf Construction and Barrington Construction, and they both met the qualifications that we had approved. And so now I'm just asking you to make a motion to allow these 2 contractors to bid on our project for Mary Hogan.
Motion.
So moved.
So moved. Okay, so Chip and Suzanne.
Perfect.
Any discussion? Any questions? Chip?
I have a question. they'll make a bid, this has to be done by the end of the year, correct? Because it's ESSER funded.
Yes, yes, so the deadline to have the work done is before the start of school, because ESSER funds need to be expended by the end of September.
Okay. Just making that point.
Yep, thank you. Anything else? Okay, so all those in favor of approving the Mary Hogan ESSER Project Coordinator pre-qualification, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And Ellie, sorry, I didn't see her. Since
Yeah,
she didn't.
she's not staying.
Yes, I said aye, sorry about
Oh,
that.
no, it's, sorry, thank you. It'd be nice if her picture could stay up there so I could see her.
We could pin her.
Okay, so the motion passes. Okay, then the next one.
The next one.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next one, that's okay, is an action item. And that is a motion to set the MUHS school choice capacity for fiscal year 25 at 15 students. And you'll see in board pack, that is a historic number. And I believe when Caitlin and I looked into it a couple of years ago, it was very historic. It's really what we've done for quite a while. We currently have 3 seniors, 8 juniors, 2 sophomores, and 2 freshmen. And the hope is to keep that 15.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I move that ACSD continues allowing up to 15 students to attend MUHS under the school choice provision.
Second. Second by Mary Heather. Any discussion? Okay, Jamie and then Tricia.
I'm just curious if there's any strategy about where the most are, like clearly the most juniors. I'm just curious if we care about that and if there's a reason why that is.
I don't know, I want to say, if memory is correct, it has something to do with the siblings. That's a faint memory I have. I don't know if I'm 100% correct though. And I don't know of any strategy other than keeping it at 15.
Okay.
That's my recollection too.
That's been a long historical number.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by what does siblings have to do
If
with
one
it?
student is approved, then a sibling who also requests.
Oh, gets sort of, okay.
Folded,
Yeah.
And I think that year there were a number of siblings.
So,
Tricia?
yeah, so same thought here, really, if we don't want to exceed 15, then the way to even it out would be once the 8 juniors vacate their spots, would be to say only 5 of those are going to incoming freshmen. And then the next year, it'd be 3 for.
Resetting your numbers.
Yeah, do we do that?
Well, we would have to decide if that's something we want to do, and it would likely be a next year decision.
Because they're all gonna go up.
Right, because this year, so there are gonna be 3
Right.
open spots when the
Right,
seniors
yeah.
graduate. And then, so
Next
it's
year they'll-
really,
Right, yeah.
if we don't want to bump over 15 at any point, then the option would be to say, we're actually going down to 12 this year, and each additional year we'll bump it up.
Then freshmen would be 3 coming. Yeah, Sophia, and then.
Is that not something you would want to do by middle school so that they don't build relationships with people and then have to separate by high school?
Oh, that we could.
School choice is only a high school thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Point of order? Okay.
Go ahead. Sophia, school choice is currently limited to high school, although I think there is conversation at the state level to expand it. For the very reason you're naming.
Chip.
And I don't remember the reasons, but we've discussed this each year and the 15 comes up. And I honestly, each principal has presented it in a way that was very logical to all of us and we accepted it. I just don't remember the reason except for the balancing out of this, why there's discrepancies between years. It has to do with just sometimes siblings and sometimes how many.
Lindsay,
No, I think-
okay, Suzanne, and then Lindsay.
So the only thing I was gonna say was, I believe that as, students apply, we know how many slots we have open, so we can take from whoever applies, but the other thing is if I'm correct, Nicole, there's no funding that follows these students. So it's like adding in 15 ghost students that we educate but receive no monies for. And that's been one of the reasons not to increase it, because there's no funding with them.
Do we have district students who are going out, is that a balance? Do we have 15 coming in? Do we also?
Yeah, we have to count, we do have students who,
I believe we usually
Go the other
accept
way.
more than we
Yeah,
outsource.
that's historically correct. We accept more than we send out.
But yeah, that's the idea, is that there's no money exchange because of reciprocity.
right.
Lindsay, what's next?
I think Suzanne was starting to say, like, that year that we have 8 openings, we could end up with 5 sophomores or, people can, you don't have to be a freshman to apply, right? You could be at any level.
Yeah.
And, so there's no funding that goes along with it. Is there, I guess it's a question for you, Nicole. Is there any movement at the state level to allow funding to follow students?
I have not heard that conversation at all.
Okay. How many, another thing I'm curious about, I don't know who would know the answer, is how many people apply in a given year? Is it 3 or 30? How many people are returning away?
I'm not sure. I know that there are, in most years, the lottery for the spots is pretty competitive. But I don't know much more than that. So these are students who are looking for the school choice spots first and foremost. If they don't get those, they would have a private pay option.
Right.
As a tuition student, in which case the family would be paying the tuition associated with that student. If the town of residence does not have a high school, then they can become a tuition student and have school choice on behalf of that town, and then we do get revenue from that student, from the town.
Would an individual like that be included in this number, or that would be in a separate
No,
town?
so all of our Hancock, Granville, and Rochester tuition students are paid for by the White River Valley.
So they're not included in this, this is just the students
Just
who
the
don't
free
have.
spot, or the reciprocal spots.
And at the middle school, there's tuition students that come in. So they, we don't have a program like this, but we do have tuition students coming into the middle school as well.
And I think it's important to note that while there's no revenue that comes with these students, if the students are living with disabilities, special education funding does travel with them. And so they're ensured their supports by law and there is funding for them.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this. It's too bad that the funding doesn't come with them, but it's a real honor to be chosen by students who want to come to our district, and it's a shame we aren't able to allow more students to come into our district.
Okay, Jason.
How did these students factor into our long-term average daily rated?
Can we have a presentation?
Second question, how do they factor into our enrollment numbers? Do we count them as enrolled students when we look at building enrollment or not?
That is on the fringe periphery of the data, and it's a really good question because it could make a big difference, but I believe we do not get
Right, they belong to their home district because that's how the special education funding works.
But our students that go to a different district belong to our district.
Yeah.
And then enrollment, do we know?
They're enrolled, but they don't belong to us, which is an odd thing to say.
And oftentimes we'll see two numbers. We'll actually see a tuition, a number that includes these students. In the past, you've given us 2 numbers, right? One is our official number that are part of our district, and then the ones that are here because of this program. Okay. Any other questions? If not, what I'd like to do is, we have a motion on this, right? Yeah, thank
Yes,
you.
we need to
Lost
vote on it.
track.
Yeah,
Yes.
this was the
Yes.
discussion.
I couldn't remember. It was a long time. Okay, so, all those in favor of approving the motion to set the, MUHS school choice capacity for fiscal year 25 at 15 students total, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any- Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Okay, now we have the presentation.
Matt Klimke is here for, I was gonna say for 2.0, and there it is, clarification in student services 2.0.
So, the last time we presented, it was Student Services 1.0, believe it or not. And, in the budget timeline in December, we usually start talking about taxes after we finish, budget development. But based off of the fact that we hadn't received a lot of the, tax information from the state as of the time when this meeting was being planned, and I think the general sentiment that there was some more unpacking needed with regards to student services, we decided to kind of circle back and spend a little bit more time there this year. As far as clarification goes, I think that I've touched base with a lot of you. We did this presentation in the finance committee, and there's been a lot of discussion at FASBO and kind of throughout the budgeting community about how complicated of a budget year we're in, based off of the new weighting system, trying to bring ESSER expenses in, and a lot of other factors. So as board members, I think that it's going to become important to sort of have this baseline level of literacy as we're moving towards the months where we're starting to take this budget and turn it into a finished product and start pushing it out to the voting public to see what they think about it. And so these presentations are, really meant to be educational, to bring you guys up to speed, to help answer questions together and identify areas where there's more info needed. So please don't hesitate to ask anything that you might need more clarification on. Let's see. That'll work. So I think one of the things that we always get sort of in the weeds on when talking about budget is the idea that budget is hypothetical, it's an estimate, it's our best guess at what's coming down the pipeline in the coming year. We don't know what that's going to be, but we use all of the information at our disposal to make an educated guess. So we know what happened last year, we have those actual numbers. What did we actually spend last year? We have some actual numbers from this year. Using that data helps us make a guess of what we're going to spend. But I think as we're talking about budget, it's really important to remember we're talking about hypothetical dollars, we're not talking about real dollars. And so some of this, when we're talking about systems and building things out, is meant to be organized and theoretical in a way that it might get messy and convoluted in actuality, but it's a really important starting point. Also worth mentioning, when we were looking at early numbers in the budget to try to figure out what migrating lines was going to look like, I used these $500,000 placeholders, which is like roughly equal to what the some of the ESSER funded positions are. Those did not get removed from the earlier presentation, and so that's updated in this presentation on the student services slide. I'll point that out when we get to it. So, and then the other thing is, I felt the need to kind of go into some detail on contingency, right? Like, what is contingency? Why does it matter? Why do we need to have flexibility in the budget, and be able to see the unforeseeable and make a plan for those things? It's really about being able to adapt and respond to different needs as they arise, and to have a plan in place to meet anything that comes at us. So some of those contingency scenarios, we know we have emergency facilities, whether that's a water pump on a roof going down in the middle of the winter and losing heat in the building, equipment failure like a flood that swallows up a lawnmower, crisis response. I don't need to tell you, there's crises can happen in a variety of shapes and sizes. Student services placements, the idea that based off of extreme special needs, we could have very high cost students that we need to place into our budget and spend dollars on. Difficulty in hiring. We know that when we're in a shallow labor pool, we need to get creative and adapt and be able to respond to staffing shortage however we can. And then unanticipated spikes in student needs of just not knowing ahead of time where all the needs going to be, and having to make a plan on the fly to add a teacher or add an interventionist or add a one-on-one paraeducator to meet a need as it arises. We have this 3P development cycle, which I couldn't get off the alliteration because I think it sticks in your brain better that way. But for plan, this is sort of our budget development process, right? It's where we're taking all of our previous year, current year data to predict our future year performance. When we are in that future year, or when we're in the school year, we are thinking patch, right? That's where we're meeting all of that unanticipated need, being adaptable, being responsive, and modifying as needed to meet those unforeseen circumstances. In lieu of that, or in the wake of that, we're trying to learn, right? We are taking the data that emerges from the school year. We are building systems where needed. We are maintaining our systems that we have in place. And we're trying to answer the question, what's the long-term solution here? And what can we use to influence our next plan?
You need to actually say ponder. I mean, if you went to all the trouble to make the alliteration, you need to name the third P.
Oh, I got 3 slides.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
So some questions, right?
Just didn't even.
Those contingency scenarios from before are here, right? So if we have an emergency facility, did the building get fixed adequately? How long is that patch going to last? What's the impact on the next budget going to be? And will it happen again somewhere else in a different building? If we have equipment failure, similar. Did we meet the replacement needs? Do we need to budget based around a usable life cycle of an asset, like a lawnmower, a van, or something else like that? In a crisis of any type, were we prepared, and what's the cost? If not, what's where are we missing dollars there? Student services, we're thinking about the future, and if we incur a high cost obligation, what's the long-term outlook there, and what other placement options might exist? If we have difficulty hiring, what are we doing wrong? What are we spending, and should we be throwing more money at it to have a better recruitment and retention strategy, right? Why do we need to contract out a service that we could have for potentially less money, brought in-house, and had as a more reliable service? And then for student need, why did the need arise outside of the budgeting process? Why didn't we see this coming, and how can we forecast it moving forwards? So that's all of our ponderance. This is where we would use our data to analyze and summarize. The conclusions would inform our actions and decisions, and move on to the planning phase. And this is where we're really focused on improving and creating really good data systems and feedback mechanisms, so that we've got confidence in the work that we're doing in the ponder phase. Moving on. This slide was in the last presentation. You can see first and foremost that 743 became a 203. That's the change in that 500,000 came out there. But I think there was some confusion about the allocations here. This slide was really meant to show that we have in FY23 actual expenses, right? That's what we spent at those cost centers that year. Based off of those FY23 actuals, we need to make a prediction of what we will spend in FY25. What's in the FY24 budget was a prediction based on what we spent in FY22 because it skips a year. So we're sort of analyzing that and responding to it. It's important to realize that these things, as they migrate to the student services budget, are already being administered at the district level and don't correspond to building-based personnel or services. The vast majority of the dollars here are in CSAC contracts that could potentially have been in FY22, somebody that we had to contract out because we couldn't hire someone to fill that role. The dollars stayed there because we thought, oh, maybe next year we're going to need that same money again. We didn't need it. The budget gets right sized. But these are just examples of some of the things that we are moving into student services because it's going to accurately reflect how those dollars are already being controlled. We also have this really kind of hard to understand limbo zone. We've got special education personnel who do some of their work outside of special education and therefore cannot be on the old model reimbursed, but it's a time study thing. We have to show maintenance of effort for all of our special education work. If that teacher has a 0.2 of their day or their week not in special ed, we have to sort of break that out into this regular ed portion of special ed. And that's what it is. It's just sort of a catch-all for excess costs that can't be considered special education.
Can you just remind me what the DI acronym stands for?
Yeah, sure. Direct instruction. Okay, so here we go. This is just, again, the FY24 budget breakdown. This is our special ed budget this year. These are the parts of student services that are going to be moving in, which are currently in the general ed, also known as direct instruction, for a total of $6.8 million. In FY25, as we combine those two things, that's gonna, well, we'll see it later, but we're also moving in some special ed paras who needed to be coded differently because their work became special ed, so they need to be moved to that cost center. And then we're moving in our intervention and prevention employees who are ESSER funded this year. The net effect of those moves is what's causing that 15% increase. The move from that 1.1 million in is about a 24% increase. So taken together, as we're going to see in the financial summary page, it's a 39% increase, but it's really the sum of those two main parts. Yes.
Joanna has a question.
Can we go back to the FY24 budget breakdown slide? So this is what's in the current budget, reflected in the current budget.
Mhm.
How is the current spending in line or not in line with the budget? Like, is there anything that's alarming in terms of like not being able to hire somebody or extra?
I don't think that there's anything alarming. I think that the the spending seems to be where it needs to be. We have vacancies within special ed.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know, I'd say alarming, I'd say it's more chronic at this point. So chronic alarming, we have 7 paraeducator positions.
Not all of which are special ed, but which may be needed because of the special ed draw on our general ed paras. So you saw 5 at Mom's, right? And Mom says 10 paras right now. All 10 are at least partially special ed paras because of the need, and so that creates a void for general ed para work, and sort of an indirect result there.
So just for clarity, the vacancies are budgeted for.
There was one new position you said.
Special
Special ed was a new
Yeah,
position.
not a paraeducator.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, safe to say, like, the budget was good, like, what we budgeted for this school year was good.
We seem to be on the right track.
We just haven't been able to fill the positions. All the positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, that's a safe way of saying it. I think that, you know, what we budgeted for this year is a reflection of our, you know, priorities as a district too, right? And, you know, I think that as we move to, FY '25, bringing in the intervention, and prevention team from ESSER has been identified as a, you know, something that we're trying to prioritize as well. And, as those new positions gain a foothold within the local budget, I think that will kind of make us even more the right size for what our priorities are.
Tricia?
Can I ask a question about the next slide?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about this slide, we're saying the 15% is instead really up to 39%.
Yeah.
So just for clarity,
We get a clearer version of that at the end too.
well, so the 15% is due to moving ESSER funded, so things we haven't been paying for out of our budget, moving into our budget, that's a 15%
Yeah,
increase.
it's like 15% new money is a good way of,
The rest of that 39% is an increase, but it's because we're pulling it from different parts of our budget.
It's just a migration.
And putting it in a new
Yeah.
category. So it's really just the 15% that is above and beyond.
but when we print the budget book, it's gonna have to say 39.
Right.
It's gonna
So
go
it's that this category is going up 39%, but when you're talking about overall numbers.
All right, a little bit about intervention, how it looks this year. We have, in our rural elementary schools, 4.4 FTEs. We have 4.0 at Mary Hogan. We do have 2.0 on ESSER, who are in that group that are slated to be moved into the general fund. Title grants, Title I is are given school by school, right, based off of the poverty score of each of those schools. Those grant funds cannot be separated from the school, right? So schools, title grants are theirs to use and can't be transferred to a different school. They need to be supplemental resources that don't, that add on to the offerings at that school and don't supplant anything that's already in place. So as we're thinking about this consolidation model or this districting of our tier 2 student services, a little caveat is that anyone who's still tied to a grant fund could potentially require us to do a swap, whether that means using that grant money at that school to fund a different position so that intervention can be made more of a district resource, or some other mechanism that lets us preserve that supplemental effect of the money from the title funds at each school.
Yeah.
Yep.
Heather has
Is there flexibility in what's eligible for Title I spending that you have that flexibility to
Yes.
designate a different position as Title I funded? So that you can sort of free up
Yes.
the student service position to be district-wide and fluid between our cost center locations?
Yep.
Okay, good.
So that's the caveat there. Next one on computer. Okay, the next thing, a little bit about people who do two different things, at least two. Multi-tier student support personnel. All right, so that got MTSSP, multi-tiered student support personnel. So many of our student support personnel that work in our schools, especially in our small rural elementary schools, will provide services to students in more than one educational tier. A great example would be a paraeducator who might work part of their time with an IEP student, or and another part of their time as sort of a general ed para, building assistant doing recess duty and bus duty and helping out in classrooms or the cafeteria. That person's a hybrid. school counselors and nurses also kind of have hybridization across multiple tiers. These people fluctuate based on need they're the front line of need response and get sort of put into a triage role to meet need wherever it emerges first before anything else can happen. That can have a couple different effects. So a paraeducator who's got an IEP student might not have that IEP student the next year because they went to middle school and become 100% general ed para. So that can go that way. Or we can have a school counselor who's got one IEP student, but is also doing some curriculum work and some general counseling at tier 1. Courtney's example of if your hamster dies, you have somebody to talk to, no matter if you're on a plan or not. That person can be given, 3 more IEPs in a given year to meet need, and that's going to diminish their capacity to provide those tier 1 services. But again, the triage, the priority is to meet that special education tier 3 need. You can have a school nurse who has some IEP duties, some 504 plan duties, but also is doing ice packs and Band-Aids and cough drops. Additional 504 plans could come in. This again is just an example, and diminish the capacity for the school nurse to provide tier 1 services to every student in the school. Requires a response. In our FY24 model, this was sort of how we budgeted for these positions. So if we start with paras, we have general ed paras, special ed paras, pre-K paras, library paras. Those are the 4 main categories of paraeducator. That's the distribution at rural elementary, Mary Hogan, and then mums in high school are smushed together. For counselor, we put counselor, etc., because in the educational quality standards, which is one of the main metrics that we're about to introduce on the next or the coming slides, educational quality standards from the state of Vermont are not counselor specific, school counselor specific. You can use a clinician, a prevention specialist, homeschool coordinator, and there might be one other one, but those are the main ones. So we put etc. because I think it was important to add an extra level of detail here. There's the distribution at rural, Mary Hogan, and secondary. And then nurses as well. As a note, that +1, 1-to-1 on the nurse bottom there is an additional one-on-one nurse, which is one of our employees, but again, a special mention because they are not doing anything other than one-on-one student work. So now we're getting into how will we budget. This is a counselor example, but it could be any one of the 3. We have on the top 2, the students, the special ed and student services cost center. That's where those costs are going to live. And again, this is still one person that we're talking about. All of the costs associated with the tier 1 of that employee would be based on state standards and building enrollment, and live in the school cost center. So wherever that person works, those dollars live there for the tier 1 FTEs associated with them. All of the other dollars are based on student need and live in the special ed and student services cost center. Education quality standards, that's EQS. This is the minimum mandatory operating cost. This is what the state of Vermont says we have to do to run a school and to be compliant at that state level. It's the floor. If we keep the EQS as the floor, then you can think of tier 2 as the walls and tier 3 as the ceiling. All right. Now we're talking about the quantification of need. So how do we figure out what we need? How do we measure need? At tier 1, which is the floor, the standards tell us what we need. Those are the state minimums. That's the basic need set by the state. Makes it really easy to say this amount of FTEs goes in each school budget. We meet our need, done. On the ceiling, we know that our IEPs dictate our needs. So students on IEPs have really defined need, and it's something that we have all of the documentation that we need to know what the prescription is for meeting that need. It's a little bit trickier in tier 2, and this is where our data systems come in, where we're using our good feedback loops that we're developing to have data-based quantification of what need is and a resource allocation based off of that to meet the need. So this is new because we're moving things in, we're organizing, we're getting ready for what's coming. This is preparation as much as it's what we're planning to do next year, preparation for future years as well. We're working, this is going to let us design and define the principal to student service interface. So what does it mean to be a principal and to work with the student services department to have that conversation about what need looks like at your school and how we can engineer a solution to meet that need. It sets us up with a model that's really based off of those data systems because we've isolated IEP need in the top, and we've isolated the floor need, the educational quality standards, and so all of the variance, all of the year-to-year changes are sort of focused right here in this middle zone. It gives us a better position to forecast from and to know what next year is going to look like, to adapt, to maintain the mandatory provision of tier 1 service. So this is what we were just talking about at MUMS, right? So if all 10 paras get pulled into IEP-based special ed work, we know from our system what the void is that we need to fill. How many FTEs do we need to hire for to replace what we just borrowed from tier 1 to sort of get back to running a normal school where every student has their state mandated allotment of FTEs at those services positions. And that's, again, another way of saying that is that we're fixing operational expenses relative to enrollment. So based off of how many kids there are at a school, we know that we get, this many FTEs of student services at the tier 1 level because that is a enrollment-based allocation, not a need-based allocation. So this is the same slide as before, but I broke elementary and secondary out as 2 different chunks because it didn't all fit. So we have rural, we have Mary Hogan, and then we have sort of the student services budget and how that's going to look next year. So on the paras, this is enrollment based because there is no EQS that gives us a metric for what enrollment paras look like, enrollment based paras look like. So we used an administrator adjustment factor. What that means here is that as schools get bigger, administrators lose their ability to be a utility infielder at the same capacity as they are able to do in a smaller school with, let's say, 40 students. So you've got 2 administrators at a school with 360. You have 1 administrator or a half an administrator at a school with 40 students. And this accounts for that in that general ed para line. We are eliminating the 0.5 library para, which is a vestige of sort of an artifact of pre-district staffing and not needed based on enrollment. The logic behind having a library para is that it's a more efficient way of running a library to have one librarian and to use a para to support the librarian than to have multiple librarians. In guidance and student support personnel, the EQS number at elementary school is 1 for every 300 students. Using that metric, we get the same allocation of 1.3 FTEs at both our rural elementary schools and Mary Hogan. Based off of who we currently have on our team there, we've got an additional 7.8 FTEs that we supplement that 2.6 floor with. And so that supplemental is really what's in the middle zone to meet the need as it emerges across the district, wherever it is. And remember, that's going to be CSAC clinicians, prevention specialists, and school counselors. For nurses, it's 1 for every 500, so that means it's about 0.7 of a nurse at each spot there. We have 3 nurses for elementary school, and so we're supplementing a 1.6 FTE nurse. At secondary, similar numbers here. I think the one thing that I would mention is that guidance SSP at high school is where you're going to see a college counselor and a career counselor kind of join that supplemental FTEs. And I did include that one-to-one nurse on the supplemental because it really does factor in as a supplement and not a part of the standard. Okay, so here we are at the last 2 slides. This is our
Question, Matt, I'm
Sure,
sorry.
sure,
Is
sure.
it okay?
Mary Heather,
Yeah.
yes.
I'm just wondering the ratios, the 1 to 300 for counselors per students enrolled and 1 to 500 for nurse. What is that based on?
It's the EQS Educational Quality Standards.
Yeah, the state of Vermont.
So that's the state number.
And there's nothing that says you can't go more than that.
Right.
But
That's the
that's the
minimum.
floor, right?
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
So here's our student services and special ed budget line with the mistake corrected from the earlier drafts and that 39% number. If it's hard for you to see, here it is bigger. And so just to reiterate one last time, to make sense of this, what's going on in student services and special ed, we have salary increases, TBD, healthcare increase of 16.4% for everybody in the district. We have our student services ESSER positions moving in. We have those other student services lines being moved in, and we have our paraeducators who need to be coded for special ed moving in. So that's all of the net changes here. And with that in mind, it's really that 15% that we're focused on. If we brought what's migrating into the FY24 budget, that year-to-year increase is really only 15%. Okay, that's it. Other presentations are here if you need to brush up on any of those and shoot me any questions.
Mary Heather.
Yeah, just want to follow up on that prior question I asked. So the standard is based on enrollment for a building or for a district or for what is the?
It's per the number. Yeah, it's per the number of students enrolled, and then if the building is smaller than that base number, then you adjust it for the size. So for instance, administrators, it's 1 FTE principal for every 10 teachers. So you have to, if you have 10 teachers, you have to have at least 1 administrator. But if you only have 5 teachers, then you can have 0.5.
Okay.
So you're allowed to adjust it down.
Prorates, yeah.
Yeah, you're allowed to prorate it.
Which is what we end up doing at
Which is what we have been doing.
Yeah.
So essentially that 1.3 guidance shared among all of the rural schools will translate into a certain amount of time per week.
That 1.3 of guidance is one portion of how many guidance counselors we actually have. 1.3 is the EQS.
So there's the supplemental.
So we have additional.
Right. But I guess this is what I'm trying to understand, what, I understand like what's happening with the filing, right? We want, some of these positions are now filed under student services and some are filed under general ed at each of our cost centers. But what is actually happening on the ground? What is the student experience?
Right now?
No, what's being proposed?
Well, the budget is proposing that our baseline, our floor is the EQS.
Right.
But that we supplement it based on student need.
Right. So, and then this kind of goes to my other question. So we've got staffing established based on the EQS and then supplemental need, right? So we've identified, okay, our student need is, we've got so many students who need tier 2, so many students who need tier 3. So we're going to supplement the EQS with appropriate staffing for that. What happens though when, for example, this year and last year, when you've got absences in the building and some of those personnel are then used to provide tier 1 instruction and they're not doing their designated work of providing tier 2, tier 3 services based on student need that we have determined as a district?
Well, it happens both ways. It's both, sometimes we have staff that get shifted. It's more often than we have staff shifted into tier 2 and tier 3 services than vice versa because of the legal obligation.
Right.
All IEPs contain a statement that explains that we have a legal obligation to provide. We track anything that we don't provide, and then parents always have the right for compensatory services. So they can say, and we can look at the data and say, this is how much your student missed. Let's now look at how they're doing and determine whether or not we need to provide compensatory services.
Which you would contract out then, presumably?
Not necessarily. Sometimes we use staff from within. Yeah, compensatory services are really complicated because they don't involve money, but the word compensation is there.
Right, yeah.
And it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not, I don't have a paraeducator for 5 days, so I get 5 days of paraeducation. Instead, you look at the progress a student has made or not made and determine what they need, and then you make sure you get that service to them.
Right. I guess, the thing that I continually struggle with is how we are meeting the needs of all of our kids with this kind of distribution and this kind of, this is just a bone I'm going to be chewing on for the rest of my life, I think.
Me too.
Sure. Well, in our discussions with finance committee, we've heard this now, he's given it to us a number of times, and in all the years on my school board listening to budget stuff, never have school boards been trying to immerse in this kind of, if we want to call it, detail. And the reason is because it is really complicated. And this is just a fragment of all of the pressures that we're under. The whole change in the special ed and student services funding for need and all the other things. We have to determine what needs we have, but we also have to determine all these other issues of student waiting and what do we do with negotiations? How do we pay for the huge increase in healthcare costs? And so we can't, even though we look at this as need and trying to balance off however imperfect it may come out to be, it's still also tempered by all these other pressures. It's not just us, it's everywhere in the state. And because everyone's having to figure out how they're going to deal with this radical change in funding and the radical change in student count and the radical changes in negotiations. for a lot of districts and the radical changes in healthcare costs. These are radical, these aren't 1%. So I think part of this, yes, it is a little making you go to sleep to some degree because it isn't exciting. But we really felt somehow we have to try to get us to a point, at least so we're all equally confused.
I'm just worried about the public being.
Well, the public is sure.
And that's exactly where I wanted to go next, right? It's, that's been my concern for, ever since we started talking about this budget cycle and seeing the impact just of the waiting study itself, right, on funding. And, as a board, how can we get out there and help educate the public, right? A lot of districts, and I know, some people don't, come to meetings, that kind of thing. But I do know that a lot of districts are, putting things together, to really be able to do listening sessions, Q&As, presentations. Is there a way, just kind of brainstorming? Jason had a good idea at the finance committee meeting. Maybe we have like something recorded. Could we enlist the help of MCTV, to come and help us once we have something we'd like to present? But we got to keep it at a level that is understandable, right? We can't get into the weeds necessarily, but enough that would enable someone to walk away. Oh, I get these are the pressures that are on there. And then, if we had that available, we could then maybe do Q&As in the community, because we could have people listen to that ahead of time. So I'm really open to folks' thoughts. Is this something that the communication and engagement committee, we should have them take a look at, what tools we could use and who do we need to help put something together? And sorry, I keep looking that way. I don't mean not to look over here. So I'm worried. We really do need to do something, I think. This cycle, in the past, we've gotten away with it, right? We haven't really had to do much other than do that presentation after a lot of people have already voted, right? Because it's just before the polls.
I have a clarifying question for Matt. How will we budget the yellow column? So the supplemental, for example, like the 9.4 guidance SSP, mine has a different number.
Yeah, we double checked that today.
It does.
Yeah.
But so was that calculated based on the bullets of the walls the data need, or was that just what the difference is between EQS and what we have?
That's correct. The second thing you said.
Okay, so it's not, that column isn't using sort of the new system of like calculation yet.
No.
It's a carryover.
That's who we already employ or contract with.
Got it.
Not to be hired.
Are we looking at that system, or should we be like anticipating that system now? Like what Mary Heather was saying, I totally understand the filing. I guess I just thought, is this just one step and then next year we're gonna really implement the new system for the walls?
You're saying, Joanna, in theory, with all the data that we have available to us, we can better define what that tier 2 need is.
Yeah, I thought
We're
that's
not
what you were
using
saying
that data right
doing.
here, right? This is just what's available. This is just the remainder of what cash we have.
This is the cleanup effort, right? And then I think, we have our new EduClimber. And other screener data tools that we're, sort of weaving into a system that will be the way that we measure the walls, and whether that's to work on the equity gap or to, work on some of the SEL need at different locations.
Got it.
Those are the tools that we would use. But in order to use them effectively, we need this level of organization that lets us sort of have our deployments ready where they need to.
Is there room in this budget cycle to look at that column? and to see how it aligns with the potential of the need in the future.
Which column?
The student services column,
Oh,
the
yeah.
yellow column.
So
Yeah, do we have that data?
look at the need in the future, so the database need in the future is what you're saying.
Or
For
current,
the,
even
for
current
the next
needs.
year.
What's the delta between what we wish we had?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a.
Yeah, it's.
And that's sorry to interrupt, but that's kind of what we do when we're talking to the principals, right? Is to say like, what do you need, right? And it's SEL, you know.
So when Matt and I have been working on this, I will be totally transparent. Every now and then I go, but what are we actually doing? And he has to remind me this is a budget, not an allocation of resources, and not. So this is the theory of how we're organizing it, because it's never been organized with a logic model. And then I believe at some point in the next couple of weeks, there will be, these are all the positions that principals and Courtney and Nicole and Matt have identified, and Tim, that are needed based on data. So which may or may not move that number up. I don't have them all memorized though, so I don't wanna.
The other thing that we're up against is that we've got a really hard cap on the budget this year, right? And so there's not a lot of like, we know that negotiations with both associations are pending, and you know, we know that there are a wide variety of scenarios that could present themselves, but I think in most of those scenarios, we wind up hitting our 10% cap.
Right.
I think that based off of some of the tax rate information that we've received from the state so far, we've got a preliminary LTWADM using the state's data, which was about 47 less than what we had been projecting. So we took a little hit that way. They are going to release a V2.0 soon, and they're predicting that it's going to go up on ELL and poverty, which is where there was a little discrepancy. We're still hopeful that we might see some bounce back there, but we took a hit on that. And then the tax yield came out, and that came out right around where we expected it to. No major impact there, but all things considered, we're looking at, if we hit the 10% cap, we know we have X amount of dollars left in the budget before we hit that cap. Once we pass the cap, we would have to go in front of the state review board, as you guys have heard. But in order to go to the state review board, we'd have to pass the budget first, because it's only in a voter-approved budget that would pass. And if the state review board said, no, we don't like your spending plan, we're going to give you the full property tax increase. Based off of where we bring it to them, let's say 11%, 12%, we could be looking at a 28 to 30% property tax increase. We just lost our 5% cap. We're at 21% right now, capped to 5. And so the idea that we would ask voters to approve a budget that might result in their property taxes going up after the fact, close to 30%, seems unrealistic. And so it seems unrealistic to me that we would sell anything other than a 10% budget to the voters, and then meet the repercussions of the oncoming negotiations as they come.
Yeah, and we also have to look at, they put this cap in place so that we can adjust over the next several years, right? And so if we're way up here, it's going to be really hard for us to, there will be a cliff.
So the one thing I'll say about that is if we hit the cap this year, and the negotiations create an unfunded mandate, we could potentially be looking at a deficit budget scenario, which would create a line item that we would need to dig out of next year and hit the cap again with the need to fund that deficit, and sort of use a 2 or 3 year slope to level this off.
Steve. And then Ellen.
Steve
After
first, but
Steve.
just to get on your radar.
So to speak a little bit about negotiations, for what I can say, and this is general, this is not what's happening right now. If we come to impasse with the association an arbiter comes in and they decide what the contract is. And we can budget all we want, but if the arbiter comes in and says 9%, or 11% or whatever, we're required to do that. And the only way you can balance that out in budget is to cut staff. And we're talking about adding people. We're on a cliff that says we might have to cut people. And where does that come from? It's just, Chip was saying earlier, and he said this in the finance committee, it's bad news all the way around. And I don't see a way to add more than we're trying to hang on to by moving those ESSER positions into permanent positions. We may not even be able to do that at the end of the day. So it would be great in a perfect world. Yes, we need all these interventionists. We need, all this stuff. I don't see it happening. I don't see how it's going to happen. And so I think Matt is doing a good job warning us and saying, look, there's no fat in this budget. And if we got to cut, where are we going to be able to cut? Because we don't have any leeway. We really don't. So.
Ellen, sorry.
I don't know where this would fall procedurally, because we have a fiscal cliff that we're facing that we can't go over. And that's what we're, the limitation that we're working within this year. Thinking about communicating this to the public. I also think at some point, we should know what our needs are that we're not meeting, that we can't meet because of the fiscal cliff that we're facing or because of other factors. Because that also explains why punishing budget is actually fiscally responsible compared to if we were really gonna go for what the data is telling us would truly meet the needs of all of our students. I also think that as we're facing next year's budget cycle, not to get too ahead of ourselves, with a strategic plan in place and a new permanent superintendent who will be working with Matt and all of our staff to align all of our decision-making, including our fiscal decision-making around meeting the targets and the goals of our new strategic plan, understanding what the financial realities are of getting to those places and where we are or are not able to meet those goals or those targets or those plans is really important for us as a board. The level of detail that we are getting into may be abnormal or just, extraordinarily necessary this cycle. But I think long-term, our role, right, is to understand from the highest possible level where we want to be, and then can we actually get there? And how do we use the resources we have or work with the public to identify where we need more resources? So this is not for this budget cycle, because again, I recognize, I think we all recognize we have this cliff that we have to stay away from falling over. And I do think that's a big part of how we communicate this. But understanding, if we have more, if the cliff went out farther, what would that mean for our students? And what is the distance that we can't go to get to where we want to be? I think is going to be really important information for us to have as a board and staff and a district over the next 5 years.
Thank you, Ellen. Mary, Heather.
I totally agree. I think it may be unusual for us to, be looking at this with such granularity, but I think it's really, really, really important for us to all understand the predicament we're in so that we can communicate this to our stakeholders. I do think, this is not a new thing, though, I will say. I mean, this has been hovering over us for a long time. This is, and we have kicked the can down the road many times. And next fiscal year will be very similar challenges. And so will the year after that. And so I do want to just put out there that I think as a board, we need to be very careful about asking to turn up the thermostat without being willing to put on a sweater. I think we need to really be careful about being efficient over the long haul and look at the long game here. You know, this isn't just next year. So when we're talking about student need, we do need to have the conversation about how our district's configuration meets that need. We have to have that conversation. And we're not gonna make any big changes this fiscal year, obviously. But I just wanna put out there that this is a question that keeps surfacing, and we have to have that conversation. And we can't ask the taxpayers to, you know, pay for more staffing if we're not being efficient with how we're distributing those resources. And I think we have to be willing to take a really hard look at some of those circumstances.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's important to have the reallocation conversation. I mean, in this current budget cycle, even like, you know, do all of our elementary school students, we should look at the technology budget, like really look central office budget. We should look across, not just focus on this, but if we're talking about this really tight budget cycle, we have to look at all of it. I mean, my first grader has a laptop, and I guess I'm like, is that a priority? And I don't know, I think I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but that's how does our technology budget, how does our central office budget compare to other like-sized districts across the state? Even in this budget cycle, reallocation. I mean, do you agree that there isn't fat to trim, like what Steve was saying?
Well, I mean, I think if you go back to the beginning of the presentation where we talked about contingency and the importance of being able to adapt to different scenarios, that we have maintained our pliability to the extent that we're comfortable. I mean, we have a contingency fund that we maintain at a certain percentage of the general fund, and that's what, you know, sets us up to be able to meet unforeseen need as it emerges. And, you know, we've been able to maintain that. I think that we have the ability to bring a 10% per pupil increase budget forth without sacrificing that. I think that we're looking at close to 85, maybe more percent of our dollars go to staff. And so non-personnel items, whether that's, you know, laptops or pencils or books or anything like that, make up a tiny fraction of what we're spending our dollars on an annual basis. And when it comes to making changes that move millions of dollars here or there, it's always people that we need to be looking at.
Suzanne. Unfortunately, this brings back flashbacks of when I was on the Bridgeport board, and when we had a per student cap on spending, and it was so difficult to meet the needs of students, knowing you had to stay under that cap without going into the double taxation. And I mean, we had a member on our board that would say, oh, if it was $13.68, we can go to $13.67 per student. And it's like, yeah, but if somebody calculates it wrong and we're over it, then we're in a mess load of trouble. So it's really difficult, you know, and trying to walk that line between what the students need, being fiscally responsible, and what our constituents can afford to pay. I will also remind the board that Peter Collins always used to say, well, the state gives money back to those that are of lower economic need to help them pay their taxes. But what he never followed it with was that money that was given to people to help them pay their taxes then turns around the next year as being income that they have not paid any taxes in on. So then they've now had a bump in their income without paying any taxes on it. So they have to come up with money to pay the taxes on it. So it's a double-edged sword. And it's not a good place to be in, and it's a difficult place.
Actually, with the needs, income-based sensitivity that's in the tax code, it's based on a previous year. So if we raise and the tax bill goes up $2,000, people have to pay that $2,000 this year, and it would adjust for it the following year, because it's based on, your previous income.
Based on like tax year 23.
Yeah,
24.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it takes a year to catch up,
Yeah.
which is serious.
I mean, we have people that are doing reverse mortgages to stay in their homes, and that's
Right.
scary.
So it's important stuff. Kind of getting back, and then we'll need to move on. My question a little bit ago was, how do we want to maybe utilize our communication engagement committee? It seems like we need to start thinking about that, because it's soon to be March, right? And so we have to, if we're doing any education and that kind of thing, it has happened in January and February.
When will we have the sort of best, most concrete information that we can take to the public and have confidence in that information? Because we don't want to go too early with fuzzy numbers.
So again, I think that's the timing part's a little tricky, because we expect the negotiations will outlast that approval process. Therefore, we can make the assumption that wherever we're at right now, expenditure-wise, everything between that and 10% is already spent, right? But if we are committed to having a safe property tax strategy, a risk-free property tax strategy, then we can't go past 10% per pupil. And so therefore, yes, we do kind of know what our number is, because we know that it's going to be that year-to-year 10%.
Right.
Using the state's LTW ADM that they gave us, which may shift a little bit, and that can move the needle a tiny bit, but we're getting there. And so I think that, for the sake of creating a 2-page document that we could, hand out to people, we could use that as a confidence number.
I was gonna actually just throw out there, I wonder if there is like a way that some members of the finance committee and the communications committee could be working together on this starting in January with Matt. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Suzanne?
I also, I know I would be willing to talk to like my select board, because our town has gone to a different year budget. So, this would be very helpful for them to know as soon as possible as they go into setting their budget. I also have been asked by the Bridgeport PTO, whenever possible, to appear and answer questions. So they always like to ask questions about the budget, and so I'd be willing to pop into their meeting and do that. I mean, that's what I can do in my town.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to do it other places, but I just don't know when they meet.
And I think what we need to do is have materials that we all use for consistency
And like a strategy.
and a strategy. And ideally, if we did have something recorded for the really in-depth, if somebody really wants to go a little deeper, they could listen to that, because I don't expect, we can have a basic understanding, but, to get down in the level that Matt has, it's gonna be really hard. Okay, Chip.
The complication is that, and I see it over the 30 years, it's just not here to here.
Right,
okay?
right, totally.
And there's so much in the middle, and Brian can relate to all the years we've talked about school budgets all over. And that's the hardest part I have, to come up with some idea as to how to explain this. Because if we're gonna work, we're having equity, we're having need, we're having inflation, we're having negotiations, we're having all these costs that we can't control. And at the same time, you have a governor, or you have other folks that are making these real generalized type of things, as if we're the bad guys in this great expansion of school costs, when in fact, most of it we can't control. But per your question, Joanna, relative to things like central office and all, sure, all those things are, I think, looked at, but as Matt says, it makes up such a tiny part. We could eliminate half of what we do in the school, whether it's co-curricular, central office, but you can't, it's too complicated. You need a lot of people to be trying to figure it out. And I just feel a little helpless in this point, more so than I've ever felt before, honestly. I just don't know where to go with it, because it's just, we're sort of in that terrible place, especially when we want to look at need. How are we going to correct deficiencies with COVID? How are we going to do that?
Right.
One thing I'll say, as board member ambassadors of the budget, I think it's really important to realize that, like, as we get closer to the town meeting day, the number of people who just want to know what the property tax bill is going to look like goes way up, right? And the educational strategy and the school district's intentions and visions are contained in the cost center analysis that we spend all the time on the front part of this. I remember finding Logan Price's slideshow for the tax presentation, which is like the second to last one, and I was like, "Where's all this stuff about like schools and kids in here?" And it's like, there's nothing, right? It's just like, what's the CLA? What's the equalized district tax rate, and how much is my bill going up? Because as we get to voting day, that's what the majority is going to want to know. And so I think that as board member ambassadors, instead of focusing on some of the granularity of student services, focusing on Act 127 and this idea that, like, the budget is a 10% year-to-year per pupil increase because of this new weighting system. And once it goes past that, we risk losing the 5% property tax cap. If you can master that, that's
probably, yeah.
That's it, yeah.
I agree. So I'd like to propose maybe in January, we schedule maybe a combined finance and communication engagement committee meeting. And we can spend a part of the time. We don't have to be all together the whole time, but maybe we could have an overlap of our meetings or something, so we can focus on how we're going to communicate.
Agree.
Okay, so folks, we do need to move on, but this is so important. Thank you, Matt, and really appreciate all the work that you're putting into this. So I'm going to try to catch us up a little bit so we can get out on time. We're about a half hour behind. Next is report of the chair, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the introduction plan for Dr. Baker. Okay, so Emily and I have worked with Dr. Baker on kind of how to introduce her best to the ACSD community, and what the goal is to really maximize the number of administrators, teachers, staff, students, community members that are able to really participate and not necessarily just have a one flash in the pan kind of event and then be done with it. And so we've decided to do a series of events. The first of which is coming up on Friday, because she's available on Friday. And there's goals around and priorities around those events, in the sense where she would really like to be getting to know schools, people's communities, hearing from students, and understanding strategic equity needs and priorities at a high level. And so for a lot of this will be listening tours, one-on-one community meetings, as well as potentially larger scale community events. Hopefully we can take advantage of events like Bridport's supper,
spaghetti supper
on Friday night. So for this particular one, we reached out to elementary schools and got basically buy-in from Shoreham. It used to be Salisbury, but we're doing Cornwall now because of the fact they're having an art craft thing during that particular time, which would be fun because parents are going to be there. So we're going to take advantage of that. So she's going to arrive here around 9:30. We're going to head to Shoreham, spend some time there. We're going to go to Cornwall. Then we're going to have lunch. And I reached out to our VP of Inclusion, and I got to find his title, at Middlebury college that's working with us on the equity work with the district. And he happened to be one of our stakeholders and a parent stakeholder, and he can join us for lunch. So I figured that would be a good way to, utilize him in that, because he's been in our schools. She's then going to meet with Nicole and then spend time at Mums. And then there's a little bit of time in between, and she's going to head to Bridport for the dinner. And she's helping to drive the schedule. So whenever we kind of push back and said, "Are you sure?" She's like, no, we're doing this. So what I'd like to extend the offer is there folks and board members that would like to participate throughout the day and are available to participate. Please let me know. I know folks work, that kind of thing, but there's different opportunities. So even if you can't participate for the whole time, if you want to be included, please let me know, and we can figure out how to do that best.
Could you send out your agenda?
Sure can.
So we can.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And we'll send it out in the email so you know. And,
on the website.
and it is on the website as well, but not with the specific times. Yeah, so we'll do that. Chip.
You mentioned multiple events. This is your statement of multiple events.
This is one.
Friday.
This is just one.
Right, okay,
Friday.
all right.
This is
So there'll be
Friday.
other events that
Yeah.
will be in a different.
Yeah, and
I just
sorry.
wanna make sure.
Yeah, exactly. So come the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
What we'll be doing is doing an additional kind of days in the district where we orchestrate it similar but different, right?
Yeah.
Depending on the mix
Yeah,
of
great.
community, whatever that we can do. So there's a lot of work still to be done. So we kind of just focus on what we could do this year. And because of the fact it's holiday, that kind of thing, it's really going to be hard to get people out. We decided to focus there, but there's a whole lot more work that needs to go into planning additional days, events over the next couple months.
Suggestion.
Yes.
Ask her if she will ref a basketball.
And have everybody come out.
Conflict of interest, I don't think
Well,
you should.
and at this point in time, she's actually told them that she does not want to ref down here because of conflict of interest. She actually was here a couple weeks before we selected her, right?
She reffed my son's game, I think.
Yeah.
I wasn't there that day, but I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
kind of fun. So anyway, I will be happy tomorrow to send out the schedule and, and I'm willing to fill in, I've kind of blocked my day out. I'm willing to fill in as I need to fill in and drive around that, whatever, but that doesn't mean somebody else can't join us or go to the spaghetti dinner or whatever. I think it's a great opportunity. Okay? And Suzanne, I think you had a question. No, you're good.
No, I'll be out of town Friday through the weekend. We're going down to see my husband's mother.
Okay.
But there is a cost for the spaghetti dinner, and I was planning on making a donation because I couldn't be there, so I'll make sure her dinner is covered.
Okay, thank you. So, but definitely, if you can do it, that would be awesome. I would love to have you join. So I'm going to move us up. And there's also information being put out on the website as well. And we'll probably put a like a little newsletter together to let everyone know, because we've been a little quiet about this.
The schedule's up already.
Yeah, yep.
Just needs to be changed, right, because it says Salisbury.
Oh, so we have to update that for.
Starts at, oh, got it, starts
Yeah.
at Shoreland.
Yep. So the other thing I wanted to talk briefly about was after our last meeting, I did reach out to Elaine Pickney, who was the individual that did training with us before. And we talked about some possibilities of training. And she said, what would be great if you would go back to the board and really have them help determine what we really need to do. So just to let you know how much it cost, when she came in and did the 2 sessions for us, the total we spent with the School Board Association was $2,763 for those 2 sessions, which wasn't too bad, considering it was several hours and there was prep work around it and that kind of thing. So my thought, and this is just my thought, was that if we had another professional development kind of session in this winter, early spring kind of time period, that, you know, again, it would be a one-time, maybe 3.5 hour kind of thing like we've done in the past. The focus that I've kicked around is maybe a mediated board member conflict resolution, kind of just focusing how we do better at that. Another could be building trust and team building kind of emphasis. Or you guys might have something else that you would think would better help us, right? And the whole goal is, and I have to tell you, Wendy has said to pass on to the board, she really appreciates the work that we've been putting in on board development. It's noticeable from a superintendent, you know, they don't want to have to come in and kind of work on the board. They want to be working in the district and getting on with the work at hand. So she actually, when we had lunch, you know, she complimented the board for doing that. So any thoughts? Mary Heather?
Well, I'm just wondering, also, like, when we developed our work plan for the board.
Yes.
I can't remember offhand where, you know,
We had
professional development, but I sort of remember there being a placeholder for something.
It was like in maybe April.
Yeah,
May time.
because, you know, we were anticipating, you know, you may have new board members, you may have to revisit some board governance stuff, so I feel like it's on the
Yes,
on the
we definitely
plan,
put-
the work plan.
It
so,
was, yeah, definitely.
Fully supportive of this idea, and yeah, I think it would be good to do some work on that.
And maybe for tonight, since we are kind of behind, and I know folks are probably wanting to, you know, think about it. And if you have ideas, shoot them to me, right? And then, and she even said, well, who do you want to do it? You know, if it was more mediation based, maybe we bring a mediator in or that kind of thing. She just wants to make sure that the board is deciding, you know, if they want her, she's really happy to work with us some more time. But just to think about it, okay? So we could get the most benefit out of it. Okay, there's one other little thing I wanted to bring up that came to Matt and my attention, and I passed it on to Matt. It's around the Middlebury Skate Park project. We've found out from our lawyer that the agreement really needed to be with the town, and the town is then really working with them because they're subletting the land. And then we have the dilemma that we don't have, you know, we're basically in arrears on a lease with them right now. And so we're trying to work that out. And Matt, you probably could describe it better than I just did. But
You're almost there.
okay, thank you.
In 2022,
agreement?
fall of 2022, we were working with our lawyer and the town's lawyer to tweak the lease between the town and the school district for the rec park. Those conversations petered out somehow, and the new lease never got signed, even though in the original lease there's, I think, an extra 75 years of extension mentioned, and so there's not this like huge void of an agreement there. We've sort of picked that thread back up, and we're working again with the lawyers to get the language changes to the lease drafted so that we can bring them forward to you. But basically, with regards to the skate park, the way it works is our tenant, our leasing, is the town of Middlebury. They can sublease with our permission to whoever they want, and so their relationship is with the skate park. The skate park, in order to build anything, needs our permission to develop the land as the landowner. But as far as the permission to sublease, that needs to be the town asking us as the landowner, and not the skate park asking us.
Right. So
as the
kind of the
subleaser.
cart was before the horse kind of thing, or whatever. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up because there may be at some point we have to take some action. Of course, and they're trying to go out for financing right now, so of course they want this to happen really quickly. But it's really the town of Middlebury right now. Steve,
Is that a similar situation with the bike park?
the bike park? I don't
Pump
know.
track.
Pump track, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's similar. This is the concrete skate park.
I know, but does that mean that the pump track, we need to
Should
look
have
at
really
that
been the same one.
contract also, because it, as I recall, worked the same way as the skate park.
It just means that, any of the developments that the town sponsors on the land are governed by the contract of them being our leasee and us being the leaseor.
Right.
And that there's no other agreement between, for instance, us and the skate park project that supersedes that relationship between town and the school district.
So I just wanted to apprise everyone that this just came up in the last couple days.
Seems like there should be an easy resolution.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping. So what I'd like to do is move to the report of the board and start with the strategic plan. Emily updated the strategic plan, so there is a new draft that's attached to the meeting minutes. She also did some reorganization of the per our direction, where the actual recommended actions are now appendices. If you have scrolled through this and read it, as I'm sure you have, you'll see that there is one place that we have text in blue where we have a choice, which is on page 9, which is under goal 2, access, because we had discussion around strategy 3, and we have identified 2 wordings that we can select here tonight. Hire on board coach and mentor staff with diverse identities to achieve strong retention, or recruit on board coach and mentor staff with diverse identities to achieve strong retention. So we have a choice there. And so I'd like to open up for some discussion around that strategy 3 wording. Does one of those work? And Jason.
Are we going to entertain a motion and discuss as part of a motion?
We can, yeah, let's do
should,
that.
yeah.
That's a good point.
I'll make a motion to approve the new draft strategic plan dated December 7th, 2003.
Thank you.
No.
And who's the second?
2023, sorry.
It would need to be on the.
It would need to be on
what
strategy 3, because we have to choose one of those
I think the idea is
first.
we make a motion.
We're
on the
gonna make
whole
a
plan,
motion on the whole document and then have discussion
and have
about it.
and then have a sub motion on which of these to
Yeah,
adopt, is that right?
yeah.
I second.
Is that
Mary
okay?
Heather's.
Okay.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I was just trying to move us along and slow us down. Yeah, so this is an obvious area of discussion, right? So I'd like to open it up around strategy 3 to discuss the wording that's here now, the choices that we have in front of us. And then if we need to, we could do an amendment to adopt one of those. Jason?
I think the main thing is using the word hire or not and substituting it with the word recruit. So I think people had issues with the word hire. I totally understand that, and I'm very comfortable with substituting the word recruit.
Others?
Sorry.
Steve,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
say
Steve, you go first.
I would prefer higher, and I am on the point of saying that if we don't say higher, I can't vote for the strategic plan.
Suzanne?
I like the word recruit, and I watch some of the national advertisements for teachers that go across the nation, and some of those advertisements for teachers have been on every single week for months now. And those are national ads. And so, and they're recruiting, spending lots of dollars. So I personally like the word recruit.
Juliana?
I think hire implies that there's a element of recruiting involved. I personally think hire is more meaningful in the context of the strategic plan, and I prefer hire.
Others? Jamie?
I guess I don't know why we can't just say both. You, what?
Hire and recruit.
Recruit
We
and
want to
hire.
recruit and then hire them.
Recruit, comma, hire, comma.
Yeah.
Then you hire them, then you recruit them,
So
right?
we're gonna add option C in there, Jamie.
I'm not making, I'm not trying to make it more complicated, I'm just saying, like, you know,
Does hire not imply that there's recruiting
I don't
involved?
think so. Somebody who's walking the door. Like, I think we want to recruit people, like, we want to recruit certain kinds of people that may require.
But based on the struggles that we have.
Let's point of order, thank you. Okay, so. Oh, Ellie, I'm gonna let Ellie talk. Thank you, Ellie. She's being
Hey, guys.
patient.
I just wanted to second what Jamie said, and I was thinking that to say recruit and hire would make the most sense.
So. Agreement in the background. Okay. Others? Raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Jamie, do you wanna make a sub motion?
Well, I'll make a motion that we,
A motion to amend.
I'll make a motion to amend. I'm really bad at this part. I'll make a motion to amend the motion that we say for strategy 3, recruit, hire, you know, and the rest of it, coach, mentor, staff, instead of the current 2 options.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion.
I think it's fine.
I think it's a great, we're wordsmithing this, we both understand, we all understand it, put both words in and it makes total sense to me.
Yeah, okay, I think we can vote on it.
Lindsay, what's your name?
You over there. Yeah, one thing about adding recruit, Suzanne was starting to get to it with, it costs money to recruit, you know, and so this could empower the hiring process by, you know, having both of those. So I like the motion that Jamie so eloquently.
Yeah, the word.
Any other discussion? If not, then I would like to call the question. So all those in favor of adding recruit, so it would now read recruit, hire, onboard, coach, and mentor staff with diverse identities to achieve strong retention. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
One.
Okay. So the motion passes. The amended motion passes. Ellie,
The motion to amend the original motion
Yes,
passes, we still have to vote on
yes,
the
exactly,
amendment.
yeah, exactly. And Ellie, I don't know if I got your vote. I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. I voted aye, sorry, to the, yes.
Yeah, we got
Sorry,
you.
I just didn't hear quite part. We did amend it to say both correctly.
Correct. Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure that happened. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so now, any other discussion on the document?
Thank you again, Emily, it's looking great.
Your update is already in there.
Okay, if not seeing any other discussion, that's what happens when we go so long and we only have a couple minutes for this.
Will there be more pictures in the document? I'm liking the pictures. I'm just curious if this is final formatting.
I'm gonna give it a final once over, because the formatting is tricky, it's not like a Word doc, there's some
Yeah.
touches, so in my final pass, if there's a good space for more pictures, I will always
Okay.
there in favor.
Okay.
Without.
It looks great.
They can use it if you want, yeah, thank you.
I like the ones that you've chosen. You've done such a good job with
There's
this.
some good photos out there.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is call the motion. All those in favor of approving our strategic plan?
Wait a minute.
What?
Discussion on this.
We've been doing discussion.
Okay, well,
Okay,
I would like to make a motion.
okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I propose the following. No vote be taken by this board on the strategic plan until it is reviewed by our new superintendent and her thoughts and suggestions are reviewed and acted upon by this board. My justification is the following. Strategic planning is an integral part of the superintendent's responsibilities. This involves identifying district priorities, setting goals, and developing strategies to achieve them. Superintendents collaborate with the school board, staff, and community to create a comprehensive strategic plan that guides the district's activities and improvements over a defined period. So what I'm talking about here is team cohesion versus speed. And I'm asking that basically the board vote to not deal with the strategic plan today until those two things are taken care of.
Okay, so you're making a motion within a motion. So I would need a second, right? I mean, a second on that.
But typically, we would have voted on the first motion before we accepted a second motion, because that motion was on the floor and seconded, and you had already called for comments on it.
We passed the first.
But no, the first one originally was to accept the entire strategic plan, which was seconded, and she was just, that's where we were at, was getting ready to vote on that.
Still, I think it's a motion to revise the original motion, so.
Right.
So then that's what.
It's still,
Yeah, it's a
still
motion.
a valid motion.
It's a motion
We
to
just are
revise
waiting
it.
for
We just
somebody to
haven't,
second.
yeah, we
If someone
haven't
wants
worded
to
it quite right. Is there a second?
I'll second it, just so we can talk about it.
Okay.
Let's talk about it. It's fine.
Okay. So one thing that we are going to be doing is, I'm gonna be sitting down with Dr. Baker, and the goal is to have her participate with the implementation team so that she will in fact have input into the output of the strategic plan from an implementation perspective. I haven't worked out with her how many hours or days that's going to be, but that's a goal I have to do come January, is to sit down and do that, so that she would have input. Go ahead, Suzanne, and then Tricia.
Joanna was
Oh, then Joanna, sorry.
So any superintendent, as they move from district to district, moves into districts with no negotiations, picking up strategic plans, wherever they might be. So that's something that is part of the job of the superintendent, is to move in and take on those roles and to help move the work forward. I would not want us to delay the process any longer, waiting for a superintendent to be here. And then the second part is any negotiations around extended work for Dr. Baker would need to come through the board
Yes.
for approval of payment and discussion, considering our budget. But yeah, I would not want to wait on approving this strategic plan for new superintendent to get here. I think it's imperative that we get to work on it and get it going, since considering it specifically says 2024 through 2029. We need to get going, and our constituents are expecting us to move forward.
And Joanna.
Yeah, two things. had the exact same concerns that Brian is raising now when it didn't look the way it does now. I mean, I think we are leaps and bounds. The document is leaps and bounds. We've done, the ad hoc committee did a ton of work. So that concern, I don't have as strong anymore as, in the forefront. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Baker has read a draft of it just based, and so, do you know?
I'm sure she has.
So I guess, those are the two things.
And Tricia.
I similarly feel like I don't think kicking the can down the road is going to benefit us in the long run. And I feel like although what Marianne has brought forth would be lovely, in order to really, Dr. Baker would have to do so much to get up to speed to be able to really give the sort of input and feedback that Brian is asking for, and that delay is not okay for our responsibilities to our community and to the district.
Ellen?
I also think we're in a great position to adopt a strategic plan, and that Dr. Baker has to be integral to the implementation design of the work. So when we have that conversation as a board, I would similarly advocate strongly that you should not hire a leader who, inheriting the vision of the board that she's working with and working for makes sense to me. Designing how that work gets done should be our superintendent's, one of their primary first jobs. So having her in place will be essential for that.
Yes, Mary Heather.
I agree that we need to move forward with this. This strategic planning process has taken 2 years. It is a responsibility of the board. We need to take action on this item. And I also want to point out that we have a talented staff, not just a vacant superintendent role, who are integral part of the implementation team, and because I feel like it doesn't really respect their contribution to this process to say that we must stop anything until this new superintendent is in place. I just don't think that respects the sort of team orientation that we're supposed to be working with. So I think we need to move forward with this and allow our professionals to start doing the work with some consultation with our upcoming leader, and so that she can hit the ground running when she does arrive in July.
Any other comments? Okay, so let's first vote on the change. And I can't remember exactly how it was worded. Can you help me there, Mary Heather? Do you have enough that we?
Motion to not take a vote on the draft until the new superintendent is in place.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is do the vote on this. Yeah?
Brian had to write it down.
Right. So the motion is that no vote be taken by this board on the strategic plan until it is reviewed by our new superintendent and her thoughts and suggestions are reviewed and acted upon by this board. So all in favor of taking a no vote now or delaying it, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
And any abstentions? Okay, so the motion does not pass. Thank you. So now we are back to the main motion. So I would like to take a vote on approving the strategic plan as amended that we went through to change strategies 3 to include recruit and hire. All those in favor of approving the strategic plan, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
And any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it. The strategic plan passes. Thank you. What is remaining on the agenda is committee updates. So we can go around and quickly do updates. If in fact you haven't met, or the update has actually happened, Steve, you talked about negotiations already. We can just then move on, that particular item unless you have more to say.
No, that's.
Okay, communications and engagement.
We have not met since the last, and we will come together later this week and discuss some engagement around budget.
Okay, thank you. Facilities.
No update, next meeting in January.
Finance.
I expressed what we've done.
Okay, negotiations.
Yeah, we do, I did forget to mention that we have received the proposal from support staff.
Okay.
So we now have both proposals.
Excellent, okay. And policy, we do have under policy A22 and A23. So I want to turn it over to Suzanne.
So A22 notice of non-discrimination and A23 community engagement and vision. A22 is recommended by VSBA, and A23 is also a recommended policy. These are first read, since it's late. Please read them at your leisure. If there's something in there that you don't understand, email Tim directly and he will get it to the policy committee. We, as you saw in Tim's email, we sent the huge wellness policy to Tim. He then sent it off to Laura, and she's in the process of putting together a committee to work on that. One section in particular that needs activities. And so, working on that. Another major policy that we've got coming that's also required is use of facilities. The state has, VSBA has pulled down their policy, they've brought back a policy. So we have that one coming, and then we have several other A's as soon as we have some board members that are working on A policies. And once those pieces come through, we'll get those to you. Policy committee will hopefully meet twice next month.
And so for A22 and A23,
First reads.
yeah, these are the first reads. And so we would then put them on the first meeting in January as an approval, as an action.
Provided that there's no comments from board members to Tim on them.
Okay,
If there's comments to Tim, and then the policy.
then we'll wait until the second meeting. Okay. Any questions for Suzanne? Or the policy committee? Okay. Patricia Hannaford Career Center, Tricia and Steve.
The tuition rate has not yet been set still, but we're actually quite close.
We have a preliminary number we cannot announce.
Okay,
Right. It's on Thursday's agenda.
okay. Okay, anything else there? Good?
Yeah, I mean, that's
That's the big thing.
Okay,
budget has been the consuming
yeah,
thing
that's,
there too. So.
yes. Addison Central CPAC update?
The advisory council met on last Thursday. It was a productive meeting. It was really well attended. And the hope is to do 2 events, one in March and one in May. I think there's energy and big thoughts about doing that.
I wasn't able to attend, I was stuck on a work phone call, so.
Okay,
It's a good meeting.
great, thank you. And then Parks and Rec, I don't know if they've met.
There has been nothing new.
Okay,
I have sent follow-up, but
okay.
there's been a leadership transition, so
It's
it's a little bit on pause, I think.
Okay, Middlebury Community TV, we did not have a board meeting last month. It's on Wednesday, so I don't have an update either. That moves us into public comment on any topic, and this is the time that the public in the room or on Zoom can make a public comment. Please keep the comments under 3 minutes or less. And first, I'll start in the room. Any public comments? Okay. Mary?
I have attended a meeting recently where I didn't comment, right, Suzanne?
Two quick, hopefully quick comments. One is just
around the Black Lives Matter discussion that I didn't hear the full discussion, but I was really troubled to walk in and hear what sounded like support for the idea, for the initiative, but perhaps not a full, complete understanding of what Black Lives Matter really is all about. And that made me think that there are other people in our community that probably need to understand that better too. And it might be a great thing for our schools to help both the board and staff members and community members understand why saying Black Lives Matter matters and is needed. So I think you all, it'd be great to consider how we could help educate our community on why we're raising that flag. The other thing I wanted to mention is related to Matt's presentation, where needs are conceptualized as hitting a ceiling with tier 3. And that's true in terms of the way we meet needs, but that's not, it's important, I think, for you all to understand, that's not actually the ceiling of need. Nicole won't say this, because she can't say this because it would be illegal. But what is in our IEPs is not really a true reflection of all of our students' needs. And I think it's really important if you're going to be doing kind of a inventory on what our students' needs are, that you need to look beyond what's in our IEPs. What goes into IEPs usually is what our administrators feel like the needs they will be able to meet with the funds they have. That's just the reality. If you ask any special education parent, they will tell you most likely that their IEP does not reflect their child's school needs. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong, but that's not gonna give you a full picture of our district's needs. Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, is there anyone online as an attendee? No? Just MCTV? Okay. Okay, so at this point, I would like a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. And second is Jamie. And we're done. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I made some banana bread, but I never liked some, it's where you go, I couldn't pass it around.
It's really delicious banana bread.
But you guys.
I had these next to it.
So,